Yeah, well, good day. It's Ross here again, doing part of my confession series leading up to the winter solstice of 2026, which should actually be tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And I'll be turning 55, so how good is that, eh? So, yeah, I'm not doing this to grandiose myself. This is just for my own personal therapy for this one. I probably won't even put it on social media because it doesn't need to be there. This is just me talking directly to those who shaped my personality throughout my childhood, if you wish. I was a very different sort of child. I was not one who could just accept the simple answers. I had to know stuff like, this is a funny one, is in our Kellogg's cornflakes, we'd sometimes get these little toys. And of course, I always loved to win the treat. I had to share them with my brother and sisters occasionally, but more often than not, I'd be in the right place at the right time and I'd win the treat, and it was in this little plastic wrapper. And inside it is a little plastic piece of something like a animal, like, I don't know, a rooster. I can't really remember, but I'm pretty sure once I had a rooster. So it's made of this stuff called plastic. And to me, I was a very intuitive child. I'd played in the dirt a lot and probably ate my fair share of it and understood flowers and leaves and bugs and ants and dirt and concrete and timber and the house and all the rest. But plastic was like alien. I had no understanding on it, no comprehension whatsoever. And so I'd ask anybody who I could, what is this? And they just say, oh, it's plastic. Yeah, but what's it made of? It's made of plastic. Yeah, but what's plastic made of? It's some sort of derivative of oil. And I knew what oil was. I was like, how does oil get turned into plastic? That's the sort of mind I had as a child, a very, very young child. So I did not, obviously, like, my children grew up in an era where we had phones and DVDs and that sort of stuff, and they didn't really question the stuff the way I did, and we'd sort of take things for granted. But for me, in my young formative mind, I wanted to know what stuff was made of and how it was made of that. Like wood grows from plants, not a problem, you can burn it, blah blah. But this plastic, it was a foreign material. It's funny, I'm going way off track from what I came to talk about. What I actually came to talk about is in the house I grew up in, South Bathurst, at the base of Mount Panorama, where they had the races every year, twice a year, motorbikes and motor cars just making this horrible screaming noise that I could not understand and wondered why it happened. It's just part of life we had to put up with out of the blue. So, as part of my private life, I'd always have my little hidey holes or whatever I could find just to get away from everybody else. My brother found the one I had under the outside stairs, just like a little bit of a wood storage area. Yeah, I won't go into what he did to it, but he got a chemistry set and he learned how to make rotten egg gas. And so he thought it would be very funny to go and pollute my private little hangout area with rotten egg gas. But that happened later in life. This one is actually going back even before that. On the other side of the house, there's like a side strip that nobody used. It was just the house and then the fence, some bushes and trees, whatever. It was a non-used area, and that was somewhere where I just sometimes go and hang out and enjoy the peace and quiet. So while I'm hanging there in the peace and quiet, sometimes I just smooth out the dirt, draw in it, whatever. And for one reason or another, I came up with half a squash ball. So a squash ball is like a ping pong ball sized rubber ball, and this one had been split in half, manufacturer's default. And for some reason, I ended up with this half of it, and I just found it a curiosity. You could sort of push it down, and if you sit it on the table, eventually it would just sort of spring back into its dome-shaped shape sort of thing. But even way back then, as a child, I had this concept in my head that this dome shape is a very, very important structure, an important shape. It had something I couldn't put my finger on. Exactly like when I used to sit there with pen and paper in school with nothing else to do, I'd start scribbling this figure 8 symbol, the NLM symbol, as though I didn't know why. It was just something that came to me to do. Figures, shapes, things sort of had something in my subconscious that wanted to express itself but didn't know why or how, but just resonated. That's the word. I resonated with those structures, those shapes. So this half squash ball I had, and this side of the house where I just had a bit of clearing of dirt under the bushes. No one could see me. I'd hang out there. I was like 4 or 5 years old, I don't think I was even at school at this stage, or I would have been if I was 4 or 5. I was very, very young at the time anyway, whatever it may have been. And what I'd do is, when I'm sitting there, I'd just make a little fantasy land, didn't I? So I'd make a path up to this dome and track through it, and then I had little islands and, just kids make-believe stuff that was nothing. I can't remember exact details. The only thing I remember is that squash ball dome part of it. And anyway, every weekend we'd go and visit the grandparents. They lived out of town, out of Bathurst, out at Raglan. And we'd had the roast dinner, and we'd hang around for the afternoon, play on the swings, dig in Granddad's garden, eat the carrots and whatnot. And then we'd fall asleep on the couch, listening to them playing cards until the depth of night, until somehow we got rudely awake and carried to the car and brought back home again. It was a repetitive sort of routine that we went through basically every week. And for whatever reason, in my little child's head, on that particular day, I could hear them calling me, and they're saying, Ross, and they're calling out for ages and ages. But I was just stuck in my own little fantasy world at the time, and I just thought, I'm sick of playing their little fantasy world. I'm going to just stick here and play in my own. I wasn't being rebellious or naughty or wrong or whatever it was. But in a sense, I just needed to be accepted in some way. And so they were calling out for ages and ages, and then eventually they found me around the side of the house. Instead of just going, oh, thank God you're okay, and give me a big hug and say, what happened? Why were you doing that? Let me explain my story. Why was I doing that? No. Dad just grabs me, picks me up, throws me over his knee and smacks the living shit out of me. So I'm bawling my eyes out, and I was like, I wasn't really doing anything wrong, but I got so severely punished for it that it just helped develop my mistrust of authority. Rather than being accepted and saying, oh, we're so glad we found you, you gave us a scare. No. You little fucker, bang. How dare you make us late for a roast dinner on a Sunday. And that's the sort of, because I was a very sensitive child, that's the sort of thing that I guess it scarred me for life in a way, is that, you have to fear authority, you have to fear the adults, you must do what they're told. But basically I was just chilling out in my zone. I could hear them, but I couldn't hear them. I could hear them, but I don't know, I just didn't want to. That wasn't what I was up for doing on that particular day, at that particular time. And they're interrupting with my thing, but I'm just a little child, so I don't have a say. Little children don't get to have a say. And if they try to just, had it been my child, and I was worried sick for over an hour looking for them, calling out, couldn't find them anywhere, I would have been so relieved. I would have been giving them the biggest hugs and saying, why? Why were you gone? We really missed you. And if my child had the ability to explain, I would say, geez, we'll give you more of a chance to spend time doing your thing, rather than force you into doing our thing that doesn't do anything for you. You know what I mean? Like, we're constantly forced into doing what the authorities tell us we have to do. We don't get enough time to just spend a little bit of time in our childhood fantasies, to just play in our imagination. Which is probably why we spend half our lives sleeping and dreaming, where we can go to those places and compensate for the fucking shit that we get beaten into doing and shaped into becoming functioning adults. Anyway, that's my rant for today. See ya.